Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever AEPKS alumni interview. My name is Sawad, and I'm the Alumni Relations Chair for Alpha Epsilon at Phi Kappa Sigma. Now, for today's interview, one of our brothers, Jason Payan, will be hosting, and he will interview one of our alumni slash current chapter advisor, Leo Basset. Now, without any further delay, let's get straight to the interview.
Cool. I'm Jason, and this is Leo Basset. If you want to introduce yourself and give us a little.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Jason. Looking forward to chatting with you here today. My name is Leo Basset, graduated from IIT in 2009, lifelong Chicagoan, live on the Northwest Side now, back in the neighborhood I grew up in, went to Chicago public schools my whole life, and that actually led me to IIT, which is not a public school, as we all learn when we look at the bill, but yes, stayed in Chicago for that. Lived on campus when the White Sox won the World Series, and so that was kind of cool. Even being a North Sider, because I am a Sox fan. My love of baseball grew when I was on campus, but best part of being on campus was being a part of Alpha Epsilon of Phi Kappa Sigma. And so as a member there, I was the vice president and the treasurer. So then, of course, the assistant treasurer as well. And out of that came a couple of internships at a steel mill who became the resident advisor while I was there. Got me an internship at a steel mill. A speech on campus led me to another steel company with an internship. And then finally talking to my accounting professor got me another internship downtown that led to my first job. Then a Kappa that I stayed in touch with led me to my second and current job. And so now I work in insurance, in data and analytics, doing data visualization and everything from a BA role all the way to the product that's going out the door. So I'll write SQL, I'll do data visualization. We're getting into a couple of tools in machine learning now. But yeah, it kind of all grew out of a business finance, which I didn't touch on, business finance degree, graduated the year of the recession effectively, or the bottom of it. So I got a job in kind of computers. I had some knowledge, just background knowledge of computers and things, no IT background. I took some CS classes on campus as part of my degree. But out of that came the ability to sort of work in business, but get a little bit deeper in the technical and sort of merge finance and IT and the ability to talk to people, hopefully into a cohesive unit. I've been at the same company almost 9 years now, so it's worked pretty well. And it's always exciting, the role I'm in now, as it was always exciting when I was in the fraternity, and that's why I wanted to, keep giving back as a volunteer. And that's why I sort of love this role and getting to know you guys. And today's among that. Obviously, we're in a unique situation right now, so it's great to be able to do this. So thanks so much. That's a little bit about me, though, a little background.
Cool. So speaking about like what you do with the fraternity and how you volunteer for us, what exactly is the role of the chapter advisor?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the nice things I would say about that role is that it is a little self-directed. It's almost like on a yearly basis, they're always giving you resources at a national level. And I always get support from the Housing Corps locally if needed. One of the great things about the role really is within that framework and within some of the once you get started piece, dealing with some of the grand officers especially, once you're getting started, you're more reporting back what you did. And so it becomes a sort of a role of what do you want to make out of this volunteer position? And so the way I always look at it, now given that, the way I always look at it is sort of the ability to build one-on-one relationships. So obviously going to meetings is great. And I enjoy the meeting part of it. I try to keep my presence there a little bit lighthearted because I don't want to distract from the essence of, hey, you guys get to meet in a formal environment, and we'll call both environments formal on a weekly basis at most, let's say, right? You could even argue every other week or however it is.
Yeah.
But you're meeting on, let's say, a weekly basis. Now, I try to come sort of every other or slightly less than that, again, to kind of lower the formality a little bit. And then, of course, make a few lighthearted comments, but always keep in mind that, you guys can reach out to me. So I always, say at the end, like, if you don't have my email, here it is. If you don't have my phone number, here it is. You better remember it if you want it. But if you don't, I'll be here for a while after playing pool or whatever it is, something different every time. I just made that up, right? Like,
Right.
Not as anything creative, but just the idea of being present when possible, not too much, but not enough. So I try to do a balance there and do one-on-one type discussions, do phone calls with guys that reach out to me. It's kind of surprising to me how the folks I interact with in person at the fraternity house are oftentimes a lot of the different individuals, and I build relationships with those individuals, and they're a lot different than the folks that end up kind of calling or emailing me. Nobody ever texts me, so you can
Oh,
text me. Anyway, you should text me.
all right.
But or now it's Slack, or boy, there's so many options out there. So there's a wealth of riches in terms of, when I was a kid, it's either knock on someone's door or pick up the phone, literally pick up the phone to your head. Now you've got 100 options. So that's the nice part, but different group of folks then, are really doing the tele whatever apps or reaching out in that way, but it's all in the same vein, right? Getting to know each other and realizing that it doesn't matter if I'm in my early 30s and you're around 20 or something. We're brothers. We're all kind of looking for the same things. We are all, men of honor, and, trying to establish relationships with one another in order to better ourselves, better the fraternity, better the campus, right? When I was there, boy, there was just so much involvement, and I just love sort of ebbs and flows over time within the chapter, but the amount of involvement from our chapter. And I think, you even know that now compared to, average chapters, I'm always impressed with the level of that we're not average, right? We're always sort of the leaders even within the ebbs and flows, right? Of how many people are involved. And that all, to me, of course, started early on, or my infancy in the fraternity environment. I was always, knowing folks as an undergrad I'll be in SGA. Oh, I went to a couple meetings. Well, should come to the next one. Okay, I'll go. Never got involved with that organization, but I still feel like I had a connection with it. It was like amazing. So that was one of the things that I always took away, and sort of a little bit about how I approach the role, and really just availability and transparency, that I'm available is number one. And the things I've been involved with in my time as a volunteer has been really, really incredible. The hard times from a university perspective, some relationships there, and some hard times in the chapter, and then some great times in the chapter and great experiences. Sure, we'll touch on some of those as time goes on, but yeah.
No, we definitely will. I know you touched on it a little bit, and you're talking about like the chapter's involvement on campus, right? Like, how was that impact? Like when you were active, like what did that kind of look like, and what kind of like long-lasting effects do you think that kind of had on the campus as a whole?
Well, it's interesting. So I mentioned SGA. So for example, one of the undergraduates from our chapter that was one of the more involved individuals in SGA. So our chapter, IIT and SGA involvement, officer on SGA, he was in the command area, as I understand it, for what I was told. I watched the launch, but in the command area of the Tesla putting someone into orbit like 2 weeks ago or whatever it was. Or however it is, whenever you're listening to this, but when Tesla first put those folks into orbit, it's amazing, to see. The most amazing takeaway for me was to see the amount of leadership on campus that came from our chapter, and that translated into real world success, right? If I were to encapsulate it in one sentence. The other thing I saw a lot of was taking the initiative not to join clubs, and not necessarily that they got large, but to start them right at this interest. Like we have railroad interest in the house right now. There was none of that back then. It didn't exist back then, right? Well, why is it around now? Well, we know the answer, right? Folks in our chapter got really involved and committed to something that they had interest in. And then it turned out there were other people that had interest on campus, right? That's a lasting impact. All of a sudden, somebody staying in the dorms is like, oh, wow, this is a great opportunity for me to express something I'm interested in. And that has an impact, that fosters community. And as as an undergrad now, and as I'm definitely aware, we're trying to foster the community. We're not just we're not internalizing and saying we want it all for ourselves. We want a robust and healthy campus. And whatever we can contribute to that, I say we'd all agree is a plus, and I've seen those pluses. Just a couple examples there, but when you see involvement from folks outside of even the Greeks in general, when you see involvement and buy-in from things that people start, or you see involvement that translates in a real world. That's a couple big things for me that I've seen takeaways.
That's fair, and honestly, like I think I still kind of see a little bit of that now. Because I remember when I first joined, uh, we were at we had a meeting and someone had asked like, oh, so how many people do we have like that are on exec boards or like presidents or whatever? And like there's so many people in the room that raised their hand, and I was like, wow, I joined an organization where like it's almost an entire organization full of leaders, which is
Hmm.
really kind of inspiring.
Yeah, yeah, it can be. I agree.
Um, so how do you think? So again, speaking about your experience in the house, how do you think the culture is different? Because obviously, like you're fairly involved now. How does that kind of? And obviously, there's cultural changes because people change.
Yeah.
Um, how do you see like the culture as like? What's the differences? What are some similarities?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so I guess I'm going to use a couple of buzzwords here that, you are obviously way more immersed in it right now. So you might say, no, there's still that. But from what I see, and I guess take this at face value, say the two biggest things with the caveat of you touched on it, and I've used this term already today. It's back and forth. It's the ebbs and flows, right? Again, you see that a lot when you're looking at the time horizon, over 10 years or something like that, since I've left, is when I've been able, when I'm looking back at it, I'd say right now it's one is less clicky. I'd say there's more folks in the hallways, not necessarily doing shenanigans, but talking, right? Like more use of the Brolo, which obviously wasn't called that, but like more use of that. It was like a lot of areas were just used as storage. We had a workout area, which you guys are looking for, which we had back then. Now there's the I guess the boilers in that area, right? But that was like a workout area that wasn't there really when I was in the house. That's newer. But more, I'd say less clicks, but then and also maybe a little bit more stepping back from video games, if you can believe that as well. Now you would say how's that possible? But people are always playing them, but they're always playing them together. Whereas in my time, I'd say maybe more of them were self-directed. They weren't. There was like some experiences where we would play things where everyone in the house would play and leave their doors open. And there's some of that now, maybe with Rocket League or whatever it is. But I'd say almost all of them are like that from what I'm seeing. People don't like just shut down with in my time, like an old Game Boy or something like that, right? They're not like doing that. They're more doing again, it's amazing that technology allows so much collaboration, right? You can be distant but together. And we're obviously living that life right now, literally right now in this conversation, as well as anyone that's hearing us. But it's great that this is now rather than 20 years ago. Can you imagine, right? Again, it would be all phone calls and we'd be recording on a tape deck and mailing cassette tapes to each other. So it's really interesting, the capacity there. But yeah, those are the two biggest things. I'd say we were also in my time more in a state of transition overall. We had recently, lost Carol K. Simons when I joined. So that happened less than a year before I joined. And so I'd say it was more of a state of transition as at a whole for our chapter. So it was more like sort of forward thinking to 10 or 15 years out, which is where we're standing right now, which is kind of interesting to say. Now, I think you and I can agree, and probably everyone listening here can agree, we don't take these things for granted, but we kind of have learned to utilize and value and cherish the gift, right? The books and the house and the great support that we have from the Alumni and Housing Corps and things like that. I think that's just a hallmark to what to one other thing that's I kind of caught in the middle or saw transition, and it's just exciting to see what an amazing transformation sort of the house has had over the last 30 years, and then me bolting on it about the 15-year mark, and now seeing 15 years out, because like going back 30 years, we were a lot different of a chapter, right? And then came up with some values, and I think everyone listening will know, right? It's like come up with different values and then really embody those, and then with the gift, and then and all this. And so we've had a long walk. 19, just to use this year, right? Like, so 1990 to 2020. That's a big difference at the bottom of the quad. So yeah.
Gotcha. And so like talking about the changes and the ebbs and flows, so there's always a constant debate that at least always comes up in the active chapter, right? Is the idea of, are we a professional organization or are we a social organization? And I think there's always like that conflict of like, are we one or the other, or like, now we're trying to figure out how to balance those things. Has that always been kind of like a topic of discussion, or was that kind of more of a recent occurrence?
I think probably it's I'll give the canned both, answer, right, that you'd expect, right? I'd say it's always been about the same. And I'd say it has to do with the tenure in the chapter, if I had to break it down, right? You've got the folks, to me, let's talk from my perspective as of today. You've got the folks that are third or fourth year starting to think about who they've become, and I've got to get a job, right? We know that feeling, right? And so moving out, moving forward with your life, right? Or you're coming in, you're living your life, you're coming in most likely at a high school or a gap year. There's one student like that when I was living in the house, right? So you're coming out of your life at, newly an adult in most cases, or certainly new to campus life, to being a freshman in college, to starting college. And you're sort of looking for that social outlet, but you're looking for it within the context of a group of folks you get along with. So you can sort of find both. I'd say, obviously we're a social fraternity, so you'd have to say that that's the answer to some extent. I don't know if I was going to sign something, but to make a joke out of it, but it's both. I mean, people are going to make both out of it, and some people I think stay in one track the whole time. Some people kind of move on to the professional, maybe third year. It just so happened that I had an internship with the city, excuse me, as an example, now going back, an internship with the city that I lost, and coming out of my freshman year, I happened to get an internship. That was when I got it from the resident advisor. So, people sort of make both out of it, right? Hypothetically, you could, my internships all stemmed from the fraternity. And when I said accounting professor earlier, that was actually our faculty advisor. That was my accounting professor as well. So it all comes back to Phi Kappa Sigma, you could argue, right? So, and so, even coming out as a freshman, then my internship came from the house, but that wasn't to say I was enjoying my time and getting to know all these guys I was living with and making friends, right? And then also being an officer, right? Obviously not right away, learning my first year and everything, but then going into the second year, assistant treasurer, and then my senior year, vice president. The treasurer track is obviously, it's a long track, right? At my time, it was sort of like a 4-semester like lock. There wasn't the 2 positions.
Okay.
But yeah, so just a little bit of flavor on that and a little bit of background.
There you go. Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, sure.
So what are some long-lasting impacts that the fraternity has had on you personally that you think, besides obviously from the internships and some business connections, like just long-lasting impacts?
Yeah, the relationships, right? The lifelong relationships are the number one, I think, for me. So, I have a fairly small family, and I don't have any siblings, right? So now I do, right? I guess you could, if it was a 10-second time limit, for every answer, or every reaction or every response. But yeah, that's the main thing, is the lifelong, relationships. We're getting a chance to talk today. I'll be talking tomorrow night with a brother that I lived with in the house, who now lives in India. I'm going to talk about him wanting to move to Botswana, and that just happens to be tomorrow, right? I was just texting with a brother, a couple hours ago about potentially, because I can't see him the weekend of July 4th, doing something this weekend, right? Or maybe in a few weekends. And just, the relationships for me is the number one. And then sort of transitioning that into, hey, I really value what that gave to me. Sort of gave me that extended family, that I want to give back, and I want to keep getting to know these guys and keep building those relationships. And some of the guys that moved on to jobs and moved to California, moved to East Coast, moved wherever. I had lunch with, even this year, had lunch with and took a tour of a facility for a few guys that are in their mid-20s out in California that I got to know from the chapter. So to me, it's just the relationships and trying to not only give back in an on paper sense, but also just be around and hopefully contribute in a meaningful way to everyone else as much as literally you and others have contributed to me, right? Because this is great to get to see you today, right? I wouldn't have seen you today, if it wasn't for all this, and it's just it's great. I try to value that type of thing, and this is just a great opportunity to me to keep that going and keep building on what it meant to me and what it gave to me.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, as a current active member, I feel a lot of the same sentiment. Like obviously, like the chapter gives so much to us, and it's it only is natural to try to give the same amount of work back or try to somehow give back the same amount of value.
Yeah.
Totally understand that. So kind of switching gears a little bit here to specifically the school, right? Specifically IIT. What kind of, I mean, besides obviously you were in the Chicago public school district and, they kind of push in that direction, but what kind of drew you to IIT? Like what was it that like before you got on campus or when you got on campus, I was like, okay, I'm in the right place.
Yeah. So what drew me to it? So I'll give you I'm going to give you the candid answer. What drew me to it was definitely not fraternity, right? As with most everyone, so definitely not. What drew me to it was, I went to state for science fair a couple times, and as part of a relationship with CPS, I was able to interview for scholarships, and also by default with the science fair going to state. A couple times I was able to basically build out like a 3/4 scholarship, and coming from a single parent household, my dad had passed away, so single parent household for my childhood. Just the ability to take out minimal loans, 3/4 still I took out loans, don't get me wrong, but the scholarship and the fact that it had engineering, environmental engineering actually is what drew me to it, or chemical engineering, and then also a new business program, and the fact that I could combine those two. Now I ended up sticking in business finance, but if you ask what drew me to it, it was sort of the capacity to sort of make it, stay close to home, my grandfather and my mother, and the scholarship, and then the programming that was on campus. Now, when I knew I was in the right place was probably my first day when I was going to move in MSV. I met my roommate, and I liked the campus. I liked MSV as a whole, but I didn't get along with my roommate. I didn't get along with a couple of people that I had met there. I could tell that my floor, what would you call that? Like the floor advisor in MSV.
I think
So yeah, so like that he was a really good guy. I actually became friends with him later on, but I had the option to move right into the fraternity house. So what I knew it was in the right place was actually during what they call the Jumpstart weekend. So I actually stayed in the Skull House during when I was in high school as a senior. Made friends, literally just friends, right? Not brothers, just friends. I didn't know any of this stuff. Friends at a frat house, as they would say, right? As we don't say, but in my perspective at the time, and get to know these guys. And then it turns out that they offered a program, Jumpstart. And I got there, got to know some of the people. You can move into the house, and then they help you move into MSV. Well, when I got to MSV, funny enough, right, as life goes, when I knew I wasn't in the right place at MSV, taught me that I was in the right place at IIT, and namely, the interest of the fact that I just made, 40 or 50 friends. I'm going to a new place, and I like what I've talked to my professors about. I like the whole idea of getting to know people before I came to campus, but I've already made friends with some people that are going to be in MSV, and now I made 40 or 50 more friends. And when I saw the campus, talked to the professors, and knew that I had a safe and, I guess, for lack of a better word, loving, right, and or caring place to stay, so close to home. That's when I knew I was in the right place. I had it all, so to speak, right? Not just a place to sleep, but a place to build relationships and build, build a university experience, and get a degree, right, and learn and build myself into hopefully an adult ready to get a job. And I guess from that perspective, so far, knock on wood, then a success. So yeah, that's my reaction.
It's actually really encouraging to hear that, because like that the house has kind of kept that same ability to attract and retain people, and like obviously provide those great experiences. Because obviously the how it happened was a little bit different, but the same emotions and feelings about like people in the house and like about the house itself was, pretty similar to my experience. This is really cool.
Yeah, it stayed there, and with the inability to move in right away, and with the
Yeah.
all with the change, all everything's different, but it's all the same, right? As as you might say, right? It's kind of interesting, because when you've got that, when you've got something special, it's something special, regardless of you can do this, you can do that. You change the rules a little bit, you can move this or that, but it's still us, right? And that rolls over every 4 years, but it's still us. And yeah, it's refreshing to hear likewise, right, that you feel the same way. So it was that way and it is that way. So let's let's keep it up
that way. So what when you lived in the house, what deck did you live on?
I was on third deck.
So third deck, best deck. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
Now I assume you're on third deck if you're saying third deck, best deck.
Yeah. So that actually kind of reminds me of another thing. So speaking about the different decks, so currently there's kind of like a weird cultural thing where the house has a consensus that the third deck is like a lot more quiet, a little bit more like reserved and kind of more to themselves, and then second deck is a lot more loud and more social. Was that kind of a similar cultural thing back then, or was that?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is funny you say that, because definitely that was all the people that partied and wanted to be loud and run up and down the halls, was second deck. And then on third deck, it was the older guys. And even when I lived there as a freshman on third deck, it was, a super senior at the end of the hall by the library, or, by the end of the hall by rack, particularly the rack room, study room. So, and then across the hall from me was a pair of juniors at the time, I want to say. And so it was like just kind of, it was a more refined atmosphere, let's say. It was much, it was very refined. No, but it was a lot of folks that I feel like did kind of go heads down on their work as much as they did want to have fun, I guess, and so kind of a balance thereof, as opposed to second deck, which is just like the Wild West, Just kidding.
Do you have any questions for me, or anything that you wanted to talk about that wasn't brought up?
Yeah, no, not just, I guess, we're in a unique situation right now, right? So I guess the things that, that I would say is just try to, in general, just to share would be just try to make the most out of it. That's what I'm trying to do. Obviously, we're in, few months into the whole, pandemic situation, depending on when you're listening to this, right, so to speak. But, there's gonna be reflections from folks a month in, 3 months in, whatever. This is like of the 1/4 variety, right? Quarter of a year in, and just try to make the most out of it. That's what, most out of a situation that's less than ideal and quite dangerous, as well. And that's kind of where sort of where I'm at with it, right? And so just everybody stay safe, and I hope everyone is somewhere safe, and that they can find use of their time, and stay motivated, and realize that this is a part of our lives now, right? We're all experiencing this together. And kind of touched on it before, but it's there's a blessing to the fact that we can all stay in touch, and hopefully we're winding our way out of it, but that remains to be seen. And
Yeah.
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there at some point, whether it's, a week ago and we didn't realize it, or, in a ways off. So,
Yeah.
yeah, anything you want to share on that topic, or any reaction to that?
I mean, I was gonna say, I mean, I agree with you. I think, especially right now, it's really easy to kind of self isolate. I think, you're absolutely right. We should take advantage of the technologies we have, take advantage of, for some of us, the free time we have, and reach out and check on each other and make sure everyone's staying healthy, staying safe. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say focus on growth would be my tagline, right? Because it's kind of would be a good thing to smile about too, because within the fraternity we'll always talk about focus on growth. A
Yeah.
larger chapter, more chapters in the United States, right? We want to grow because we want to expand, for all the right reasons, right? We just love the brotherhood, and we love spending time with one another, and so that part's great. But what I mean by it is not that at all. I mean, focus on your personal growth, right? If we're all, it's easy to self isolate within yourself, but if you make the most out of that and either grow yourself or grow, like sort of grow your relationships with your family or your friends or your brothers or whatever it is, or literally grow by working on projects and learning things, whether it be working around the house, which is something that I'm doing personally, or, just grow in some way, shape, or form, and build yourself, because hey, the life passes us by. You're only a freshman in college once. You're only my age once. You're only your age once. And just that applies to everyone. You're only yourself as of today. And so just build on that and make the most of it.
Alrighty. So actually that sparks something. Is there anything that you're hoping comes out of this, right? Like for the house, like at a house level?
Yeah, I think, something that I think about is, and I'm sure as I say it, maybe some people are going to say, I kind of thought the same thing, is, boy, I wish I would have, right? And so, whatever the end of that sentence is, who cares, right?
Right.
So when this is done, what I hope comes out of it is, boy, I wish I would have done this. Do it, right? Do it, and make, as they always say, right? Be the change. And I think we're seeing it. It's like I could have been the change. I could have been the one that, right? I could have been. Well, then hopefully what I think comes out of it is, when you get back, you've been thinking about proposing this, or thinking about, boy, we really, really want to focus on this. Whatever. I don't even want to give any ideas or say anything, because then you get focused on that thought. I'm just going to say, you should have, could have, would have. Now do, right? Now, not now, today, but that's what I hope when we get there. Whatever that consists of. That the people. If you're like me, kind of internalize that and then start thinking, what is that for me? Whatever that is for you, make the most out of it when you can again. And in the meantime, make the most out of what you can now, but what you can do now is a little bit different than what you can do then, and focus on executing on both of those.
Yeah, that's fair. That sounds good. Um, yeah, well, it was great talking to you, Leo.
Yeah, likewise. Great catching up, and great getting a chance to do this. Thanks so much for the idea and invitation.
Yeah, no problem.